the American armed forces is designed to project power around the world. They have stealth bombers, 11 aircraft carriers, 3 divisions of Marines, and 4,000 fighter planes. They are projecting power around the world. The Chinese, they have got their power to defend their backyard, to keep America out. And that is now finally balanced. They now have dominance in their sea zones around their coastline, something that the Americans are very, very worried about.
Let's begin, though, with that huge display of military hardware today. Xi Jinping was joined by Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un during, it was a pretty huge military parade. It marked 80 years since the end of the Second World War. It took place in Tiananmen Square. The Chinese president unveiled high-tech laser weapons, nuclear missiles and underwater drones during the display. Donald Trump was asked about the parade earlier. Here was his response.
When they did what they did, I thought it was a beautiful ceremony. I thought it was very, very impressive. But I understood the reason they were doing it, and they were hoping I was watching, and I was watching. My relationship with all of them is very good. We're going to find out how good it is over the next week or two.
Well, let's talk about some of the weaponry that's on display and what it might mean by speaking to Tim Ripley, who's a weapons analyst and editor of the website Defence Eye. Tim, good evening to you. Good evening, Tim. Are you with us?
Pretty impressive show.
I mean, if you're a weapons analyst, today must have been like your best ever birthday because some of the stuff on display was very impressive. Just talk us through, without getting too geeky about it, how significant was this display today in terms of the future of warfare?
Most interesting was the spread of weapons tech on display. I mean, it wasn't just several thousand guys marching across the square. They were supported by, obviously, tanks, artillery, troop carriers, all that kind of stuff. But they also had cruise missiles, drones, aerial drones, underwater drones, ballistic missiles, laser weapons, stealth fighter jets, and airborne early warning radar planes. So it's the full spectrum of what you need to be a major military power was on show today. Now, obviously, it was all for show and everything was all shiny, and we really don't know if any of this stuff actually works. But some of it does. Some of it has been used. Some of the planes and the missiles were used in the recent conflict between India and Pakistan and caused lots of people to take notice because their missiles seem to be pretty good against the Indian aircraft. So, it's a snapshot, it's a show, but you have to take notice of it.
In terms of advancements in technology, what are you most excited about from what you've seen today?
Well, what was obviously working and functioning and real military capability were the jet fighters, because they obviously had to fly, so they obviously work, but they were very advanced. One of them looked almost like an American F-35. It had almost the same shape and feature, and it's also a carrier-borne stealth aircraft, which is very unusual and very a big development, putting stealth planes on their aircraft carriers. They had ground-based stealth fighters, and again, they were, they didn't look like prototypes. They looked like serial production aircraft. So Chinese air power has come on leaps and bounds. I mean, obviously they've had, since the revolution in the 1940s, they've had millions of soldiers, but it's only in the past 10, 15 years that they've got high-tech weapons.
The People's Liberation Army have been expanding their navy, haven't they, to become one of the largest in raw numbers in the world. That is something that they have been heavily investing in.
In that they're building something like 50 warships a year.
Incredible.
Considering that the British Royal Navy is struggling to build 10 this decade. So you see how the scale of what they're doing surpasses everything and has even got the Americans worried. I mean, they are very, very strong on the naval forces. They have 3 functioning aircraft carriers. The Royal Navy has 2, so that's an important thing. And we're going to see very shortly HMS Prince of Wales, Britain's aircraft carrier, one of them, is in Japan and set sail on Tuesday, heading to the South China Sea. So we may see the Chinese sending out one of their aircraft carriers to greet ours. So that'll be quite a thing to show, Chinese naval power, showing off to the old imperial powers that they can play the games we can.
Yeah, look, missile technology also to rival, well, probably beats any other nation in the world. I'll just ask a really simple question here, Tim. Put what we know China has in terms of military hardware and put what we know the US has in terms of military hardware up against each other. Who is the mightier force at the moment?
You have to think about what their armed forces are designed to do. And the American armed forces is designed to project power around the world. They have stealth bombers, 11 aircraft carriers, 3 divisions of Marines, and 4,000 fighter planes. They are projecting power around the world. The Chinese, they have got their power to defend their backyard, to keep America out. And that is now finally balanced. They now have dominance in their sea zones around their coastline, something that the Americans are very, very worried about. In the 1950s, when Red China, as it then was, first threatened Taiwan, the Americans sailed their aircraft carriers between Taiwan and the Chinese mainland to scare off Mao Zedong Communist China. Now, the American aircraft carriers stay far out of the coast to the east of Taiwan and fly their aircraft over Taiwan. So that's how things have changed. And that's the difference about the American and the Chinese military power. It's had different missions, but in that scenario in the Pacific, it is now finally balanced.
Can we talk about drones? Because obviously we've seen a new type of warfare, haven't we, between Ukraine and Russia? Ukraine demonstrating that you can use, cheap drones to outmaneuver sort of heavy lugging tanks, I suppose. What do we see in China today of drones? How do we advance those?
Well, they had on display a number of aerial drones that that seem to be designed to operate in conjunction with manned fighter aircraft. They call them loyal wingmen. So they turn one fighter plane into a swarm, which obviously makes it far more difficult for air defenses and their opponents to counter. You have more aircraft in the air, it's more difficult to shoot them down, and it's more difficult to find out where is the control plane. They had underwater drones, which was a really new thing. So they're talking about doing the same thing with submarines. You have one submarine and a swarm of underwater drones. So it's the jargon phrase is combat mass. So you obviously fighter planes and submarines cost an awful lot of money to build, even for the Chinese. But if you have all these drones, you multiply the effect and make it really difficult for your opponent to deal with your attack or whatever you're up to. So yeah. it turns boutique niche weapons into weapons of mass warfare.
This is by design from President Xi, isn't it? He has spent the last decade, really building up the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, to a point where they are now, highly technically advanced, highly capable. And he's set a deadline, hasn't he? It's basically 2 years before a key date in 2027 that she's demanded that the PLA be ready to assault and capture Taiwan if given the order to do so. So that's sort of been his end game, or certainly the goal that he's trying to reach, or say that he's trying to reach. Does that look likely, or do other nations need to be worried about the muscle that China is flexing today?
Well, the Chinese strategy, that is just one part of it. The dominance over their coastal waters and their ability to intervene and dictate terms to Taiwan. That's just part of their overall arching strategy. Their big picture, and this is why you had President Putin and the North Korean leader and several other leaders there from they call them the BRICS countries. The overarching aim is to knock off American control of the global economy, the global financial system, and global trade. This military thing is just part of that. They want to stop the ability of the Americans to dictate terms to other countries. And you saw with India, President Trump has put these tariffs on India, and the Indians have gone up yours.
Mm.
And they have the same attitude as the Chinese and Putin. They are fed up with the Americans dictating the terms of anything in the world. And they want to upend that at a strategic global level. And being able to keep the American Navy out of China's coastal waters is just part of that objective. And you see it across all domains, banking, trying to knock off the American dollar as the global currency, oil's defeating American sanctions against Russia, all that stuff is a grand strategic objective that they are meticulously and methodically putting into practice, whether it's from swamping Europe with Chinese mobile phones or Chinese electric cars to the military stuff we saw today. So it is not just a military challenge, it is a part of a economic, political, diplomatic, global assault on the American hegemony.